So in my never-ending quest to actually get caught up in all of the story for all of the games that I'm currently playing, last night I finished Zenless Zone Zero's 2.1 story episode, An Impending Crash of Waves. I just want to say right now, I feel like this is Hoyoverse finally riding the ship. So let's break it all down in a full recap and talk about some of the many improvements that came along in this segment. Now, as always, if you have not yet finished a 2.1 story, well then get out there and go knock it out. Unless you're literally just here because you don't have time to do all that story stuff, but you want to know the plot so far. In which case, come hang with me and let's dive right in. So our story picks up where 2.0 left off, shortly after us having defeated Mevarak, or at least so we thought, and thwarting the Exaltus plan in the Limian Hollow to corrupt miners and lure them into a sacrificial ritual. Wise and Bell have stayed on in Phelium Heights, helping around the temple and continuing their tutelage in Yunque Summit techniques. We begin with Bell and Wise and Pan Yin Hu being invited to a banquet by Damien, supposedly to kick off an investigation into the events that happened in Limian Hollow. The proxies are reluctant to attend, it being hosted by evil corporation Porcelimics and all, but Yin Hu convinces the proxies it's a perfect time to attend, with Xishuan and Jufufu both being away, and Yunque Summit wanting to make a good appearance. So the three of them decide to attend, and there we're introduced to some of the key players for this story. Lucro and Ferox are co-CEOs of Porcelimics, and we learn that they are both competing against each other. Additionally, we meet Isolde from the Defense Force, and we learn of the precarious relationship between Porcelimics, the major supplier of porcelain, and the military, the major consumer. And of course, we meet Alice, a figurehead appointment of the investigation from the prestigious Timefield family, whose sole purpose in the investigation is to lend her family's name for credibility. Shortly after the banquet, back at her room, Alice is frightened by a terrifying visage outside her window of some crazy glowing skeleton thing. She seeks the assistance of the proxies, whom she's been referred to by fellow heiress and friend Lucy in finding out exactly what happened. And after a little guilt-tripping by Pan and Hu, the proxies accept the case. With a little investigation, Belle and Alice come to realize that the scare was an attempt at a prank that's gone wrong, and it was enacted by a small raccoon-like creature, a Tanaki. The two spot the Tanaki out on the street, and they give chase, and they run straight into Minoto, whom we've met previously, and his longtime friend Yuzuha, who runs a porcelain shop called the Mystic Wares. Now, Alice confronts Yuzuha about the prank, and she confesses to it readily enough. And there's a little bit of back and forth, but the two do mend fences, mostly. And so now Yuzuha asks Alice if she knows something about this odd piece of porcelain that they've found. Alice quickly identifies it as an obscura, which is a highly refined porcelain device that's used for safely transporting etheric materials. And Yuzuha and Minoto take this as evidence that Porcelimics must be producing higher value items than they actually claim they are. I know, yeah, it's a pretty tenuous connection to be sure. But this is the thread that we're given, so Yuzuha and Minoto set out for Celium Bay to track down the scrapper that found this particular shard. Alex excuses herself, but Belle decides that she wants to tag along. However, though, our plan is already being thwarted by the fact that Porcelimics has blocked the most obvious ways into Celium Bay, ostensibly just to keep anyone from spilling any sensitive information about the investigation. However, there is an alternate route over a mountain road down into the bay, and so the three set out upon that road. They quickly encounter some Porcelimics mechs, whom they make extremely short work of. Along the way, though, they discover that Alice has been following them. Alice has decided that she couldn't live up to the family name if she learned that Porcelimics was up to no good, and she didn't do anything about it. So she asks to join the group. After a bit of discussion, yeah, I know, more discussion, and then more discussion, everyone agrees, and then they make their way into Celium Bay together. In Celium Bay, with the help of Isolde, who's also shown up, some scrapper kids, and a rather tenuous experiment involving ocean currents, we learn that the shard floated out of the hollow at a particular location. So the Scooby Gang sets out to enter the hollow at that location to see what they can see. In its initial investigation, all we really learn is that someone is transporting goods into the hollow using fake boxes as cover. Also, there's evidence of something huge and quite frankly terrifying romping about the labs. The crew reaches an elevator that they cannot get past, so they decide to retire for the day, with Wise's assurances that he and Fairy can find an alternate route up the mountain past where the elevator goes. Back at Phelium Heights, a suspicious fellow claiming to be a hotel concierge claims that he has a package for Alice. But the Scooby Gang is wise to his tricks, and they ambush the ambusher. Shortly after, Pan Yin Hu interrogates him, and they learn that he's from Porcelimics itself, and that they've been transporting ether explosives into the hollow for weeks, at the orders of his superiors, though he himself doesn't exactly know why they're bringing explosives in. More importantly, though, they get an access card and a password off of the guy, so now the crew can continue their progress through the hollow. However, though, before the crew heads back into the hollow, we get an important plot point here. In attempting to help Alice undo her belt while the girls prepare for a sleepover, they've all decided to stay at the temple for safety. Yuzuha reveals her lucky hairpin. Alice surprisingly reveals that she lost a hairpin exactly like that when she was young. Her and her father were visiting the Porcelain operations in the Hollow, and after they left, young Alice realized that she had lost her favorite hairpin. She begged her father to go back and look for it, demanding that he not return until he found it. And of course, she didn't know it then, but that was the last time she would see her father, who supposedly died in a car accident returning from the Hollow. Alice asks Yuzuha where she found her hairpin, and Yuzuha is uncharacteristically cagey in her response. Now, we don't know this at the time, but the reason for this is literally because Yuzuha was there when Alice was there, also as a child, at the same time. And in fact, Yuzuha is the reason that Alice's father never returned home. But more on that later. The scuba gang returned to the Hollow the next day and used their newly acquired password to progress further into the Porcelain lab. There they find an entire warehouse full of obscuras, indicating a very large-scale operation of transportation is going on. More importantly, though, they find a stable fissure at the back of the lab with many of the explosives piled around it. The group is once again stymied from progressing further due to some locked doors, and Alice suggests a workaround by crawling through the ventilation ducts. Yuzuha reacts rather alarmingly at this suggestion, but does decide to go along with it. And of course, we learn later that the reason Yuzuha is so reluctant is that these are the very same ducts that she crawled through as a child when she was an experimental subject here. While crawling through the ducts, the group discover a body in one of the rooms below, a victim of something unknown. The ducts lead them into an Exaltus prayer room that's set up right in the middle of the Porcelain lab. And it's through investigating the contents of this that we learn Porcelain and the Exaltus have actually been in bed together for a long time. And in fact, Porcelain was conducting experiments on children in an effort to enhance their Porcelain purification. And it becomes pretty clear that this sort of deep partnership maintained year after year could only come from someone at the very top of Porcelain. And finally, and most importantly, it's here that we learn of the last child to survive the experiments of Porcelain, subject ES-07, whom was showing promising results. But the experiments were terminated after ES-07 was lost, whatever that means. And of course, we actually learn what that means later on, because we learn that the ES-07 is none other than Yuzuha herself. And then, of course, on cue, the miasmic fiend reveals itself. That's right, this is the very creature we caught a glimpse of at the end of the previous story, when it was revealed that somehow Mavorik survived. And furthermore, they had crafted an abomination from the memories of Yushuan's dead sister. Now, during the fight, it becomes clear that our group is not going to be able to defeat this thing, because it is able to heal itself from the very miasma in the environment. Bell recalls the fissure that they saw earlier, and so knocking the entity back briefly, the group makes a dash for the fissure, and we get this great little cinematic of our group making a break for it, with Eos bravely leading the way. Yuzuha blasts the explosives as the group dives through, blowing up and destroying the fissure, preventing the entity from coming through. And thus, our group escapes the horrific fiend. Unfortunately, this is a bit of a case of out of the pan and into the fire, because as the group looks around, they find themselves surrounded by Porcelain goons, headed up by none other than co-CEO of Porcelain, Ferox himself. All right, so quite literally, sometime later, our group comes to and they are being held prisoner. But because Bell is a part of Yangquai Summit and Alex is literally the investigator, they haven't been killed yet. They did, however, haul Minoto off for questioning. It's also clear that Yuzuha is much more familiar with their facilities than she should be, pinpointing their location within the base almost immediately. Our group, however, though, is not the kind to be held up behind locked bars, and very quickly they find a ventilation duct to escape through. By the way, there's an achievement that I stumbled across here that if you just burn away the miasma and reveal the duct without bothering to actually talk to either of them beforehand, you'll get this achievement. Escaping through the duct, the group catches up to and frees Minoto soon enough and learn of a fissure that they can escape from. But before they can reach the fissure, they are blocked by a sacrifice entity that's escaped from the Exaltus experiment rooms. Our group fights and is able to defeat the sacrifice, but the commotion from the fight has drawn the Porcelain guards, and now all of their escape paths are blocked. Except, Zuha reveals that she knows of a final escape, a sewer grate that leads to a river that will take them out of the Hollow. The group fights their way through and rushes to the sewer grate, and as everyone is about to leave, Yuzuha tries to actually push Alice off, but Alice won't have it. And it's here that we learn the full truth of Yuzuha. We learn that she was, in fact, patient ES-07, and Alice's dad discovered her those years ago when he returned for Alice's hairpin. Doing the right thing, he tried to help her escape before succumbing to gunshot wounds. Alice figures that she can bargain with her life with Porcelain and allow her friends to live, for them to be left alone. She is, after all, patient ES-07, and her blood holds the key to highly efficient Porcelain refining process. The rest of the group escape and make their way back to Celium Bay, and the final chapter of our segment begins. A group is determined to return to the Hollow to rescue Yazuha and prevent Ferox from destroying all of the evidence, both of their experiments and their collusion with the Exaltus. Isolde is there, and she's brought members of Obel Squad with her. I believe this is the first time we meet Magus, a sentient weapon, and Orphe. At least this is the first time that I recall seeing them, and they are freaking fantastic. I truly hope that Magus/Orphe becomes a playable character at some point. Okay, so even though the group is ready to return, they face a major issue. Their return route has been destroyed. The explosives that they set off escaping earlier have destroyed their return route, and it set off a chain reaction that's rearranged the Hollow. However, there is still a route in use that uses the cable car. So the proxies come up with a plan to gain access to the cable car. They're going to convince Damien to help them. Now, at first, Damien doesn't want to agree, right? But then Alice promises her patents to the anti-corruption formula, and Damien agrees then. The group convenes at the cable car, and Wise tells the group that Shifu Yishuan is on her way, and he'll proxy her in when she arrives. From this point, it's actually a pretty straightforward journey to the end. The group makes their way through the Hollow, fighting their way forward. They find evidence of the miasmic fiend's destruction by way of a trail of corpses. Porcelimic survivors help the group figure out where to go, and they're able to tell the group of a weak point on the fiend, its core, that has to be exposed in order to stop it from healing itself. The group is forced to split up, so only Belle, Trigger, and Alex are together when they come across Yazuha fighting for her life against a miasmic fiend. Yazuha falls in the conflict and is almost certainly going to die, when Shifu Yishuan literally swoops in and saves her. And with that, the fight is on. Yishuan delivers a one-punch mankind a punch to the fiend and exposes the core. With the core exposed, the group gets after it, and relatively quickly they make short work of the fiend. Shortly after the fiend falls, they find Ferox and they take him in, and then we're treated to this really lovely reunification scene with Yazuha and Alice that's bound to tug at your heartstrings a little bit. If you have a soul, that is. And then that's pretty much it. Damien realizes that he's been had when Alice reveals the patent to not only Damien, but to the general public as well, making it worthless to them. Minato is on the mend, and the public learns about Porcelimix's crime and their involvement with the Exaltus. There is one little final bit of epilogue where we learn that the other proxy sibling, Wise in my case, is apparently having difficulty with their perception technique, and they're getting tutoring from Jufufu. It's left at pretty much just that, and this is certainly setting up the stage for something that's coming up. And there you have it. This is the 2.1 story in a nutshell. Overall, I found this to be a significant improvement over 2.0. Not so much in the content, which is also just straight up better, make no mistake, but more specifically in the presentation. There are far more cinematics here, there are more comic strips, and there were way less black screen words. Heck, even Yishuan's voice actor seems to have stepped up and did a much better job, I thought, in this segment. So you guys let me know what you thought about the story, and if you like this kind of content, please be sure and hit that like button. And until next time, whatever you're playing, play hard. Cheers.